If you watch my unboxing video about this game, you'll know that I was kind of obsessed with obtaining it. For some reason, it's been on my want list for a really long time. I think I've been captivated by it because I am interested in fantasy gaming, and this represents, as such an old game, and an Avalon Hill game at that, it represents a significant marker in the history of fantasy gaming, and it is described here as a challenging, captivating game for 2 to 6 players who strive against evil by relearning the rights of the magical orders, performing good deeds, and thwarting the forces of evil at every turn if they can. The basic premise of this game is that you are wizards searching around, gathering a total of 6 gems that you then need to bring to the person who lives at the center of this sacred circle here. And it is a combination of a sort of pickup and delivery mechanism where you are going around a map, which we'll look at in a moment, to successfully fulfill various tasks, and the tasks that you fulfill then give you various performance points, and as you get those performance points you will ascend the order of the wizard that you are in, and you will gain new abilities and new spells which then can fight off the evil danger that lurks. And the evil danger that lurks is in the form of demons, who are really the only opponents in the game. They are all the same, and this is not primarily a game of conflict. It certainly is not a war game, so I should say that at the front here. These are the demons, the demon markers really, that come into play on the map that you construct. And if you've played a game like, for example, Forbidden Island or something like that, there is a similar mechanism here where as you're constructing this map, every fortnight the forces of evil, due to some rules that we'll talk about, can overtake certain parts of the map, and then they will turn them to evil, and they can become impassable. And anything that was unresolved in that area, whether it was a task, for example, or a character, is gone. And so it is a race against time, basically, to go around this map and collect the gems and then bring them to the center of the sacred circle before the forces of evil take over too many parts of the map so that you can't do that. And of course, if the sacred circle, that is vulnerable as well, if at any time that is overtaken by the forces of evil, you automatically lose the game. So that, in a nutshell, is what the game is. And we'll talk about, first of all, how the game begins, because in a sense, there's a lot of luck and randomness in this game. A lot of the events and things that occur in the game happen as a result of a die roll, and to some extent that mitigates the amount of strategy you can have in the game. The game begins by players, now it says 2 to 6. This is really an early semi-co-op game. To some extent, it is competitive in that if you're playing it competitively, everybody's racing around and trying to be the first person to get all the gems and therefore win the game. You can play cooperatively, which I'm going to do using probably these 4 characters here, represented by purple, green, blue, and yellow. And these are the various wizards that, here's an example of one of the wizard counters. At the outset of the game, they have not joined any particular order of wizardry. They're just generic wizard counters. And as they make their decisions and as they join the orders, they will be assigned various tasks to perform, as mentioned here. Here's an example of a task. They're all, relatively familiar. So here it says, seek wind in any mountain space, deliver his message to Ishkatar, Tolmitar, of course I picked one that's hard to read, Elikov, or Zengorai, who are various characters in the game, and this is what you gain: 5 knowledge and 10 perception. And there is this RPG-ish aspect where as you gain various characteristics, you will then rise in the order of the wizard. Here is, that's too long to read, let me just choose another one. Here's another example. guide the young master Guile from the Green Grove A4, that's a specific place on the map, elven dwelling, to a random common or elven space to hear the wondrous stories of Sir Ristan the bravest knight. And here you'll gain 5 knowledge and 5 power when you complete that task. Now, let's take a look at what exactly it means by this A4, etc. So what's really novel about this game, and was in Magic Realm, which is a kind of contemporary of it, but I'm not sure it was in anything else, is this modular nature of the map that is constructed. You have 3 different types of territories. The brown ones represent common territories, and they are all, every hex here is numbered, and there's a randomizing way of when they tell you to select a random hex. I'll show you how that works with 2 D6 rolls to get to the specific hex you have. So this makes it very possible to play solo, because in many of these cases it will say, for example, something will appear in a random hex, in a random common hex or whatever. There's a mechanism for doing that, so you don't have to figure that out yourself. The brown ones represent common territories. The green ones are elven territories, and the purple ones, I already showed you this one, are magic territories. Now, what you're instructed to do at the beginning of the game is to shuffle them and dole out to every player sets of 3, and then sort of go around and then place them down and then turn them over. You know, there's not a whole lot more instruction in terms of placement other than this blue water mounted board comes with the game, and I've got it under Plexi, but it's a mounted sort of Avalon Hill mounted board. It's just blue hexes, unnumbered, and you're instructed simply to place these hexes such that they completely cover the water tiles. That's really the only rule that you're given in terms of placement. So I can do this, for example, but you know, obviously I can't do something like that. The challenge really when playing by yourself, knowing, for example, that at the end of the game you have to get to this place, for example, is why would you place it all the way out here? You know, why wouldn't you place it more centrally? And how then can you make a game that is challenging enough? I mean, it's pretty challenging because it's a lot of schlepping around, but you sort of want to minimize that. So I haven't yet figured out how to come up with some way of placing the map such that it follows the rules, doesn't make it too easy, doesn't make it too hard. The sense, the knowledge once you play the game, for example, that, for example, there may be some tasks that involve traveling within contiguous elven areas, well, that kind of wants to make you put them together. There are boats. These are meant to be island areas, and this is water that they are on, and there are very few counters in this game. One of the counters that you do have are boat counters, and you are instructed at the outset that you can place a boat counter here. I'll show you where one could be placed. It can get a little difficult to get this to stay together. When you have a town hex that is on the water, you can place a boat counter here, and it's available to be traveled. So in terms of the placement, I really haven't figured out much of anything that makes a lot of sense strategically, except for the obvious that I told you. Nobody's going to want to put that all the way out at the end. The Dragon's Lair is on this magical hex, and that also does come into play because there's a dragon roaming around, and sometimes he leaves the lair, or sometimes you as a traveling person can get sent to that lair. And again, why would you want to stick that way out at the edge? On the other hand, if you don't do that, you know, is that making the game too easy for you? So it would have been, this is one of the areas in the game where a little bit more, I think, guidance and restrictions on placement might have been helpful. Actually, I've got this one upside down. It doesn't even tell you that you need to place them oriented all in the same way, but as I'm playing here solo, that's what I would be or that's what I plan to be doing. And let's see, Hamdrill's Cottage. This is another significant tile that we'll get to. I wasn't really paying attention when I put it down, but I put it down right next to the dragon's lair, so we're going to leave that as is. And I'll just continue to do this. So at the outset, you create a map such like this with all the 18 tiles. Then what happens is you are doing your random placement using the 2d6s for the starting sites of your wizards. As I said, I'm going to be playing with 4 of them here, and I've got my 4 color-coded cups with their markers that I'll show you how they use. So I'm going to get this set up, and I'll just walk you through how I do it. All right, well, I spread these out a little bit more just to put down some more boats so that maybe we could get some sailing in. As mentioned, boat markers go near adjacent to any village hex that is on the water. Now, I will say it's difficult for me to get any of this to lie flat, and the reason that I can't put the whole thing under plexiglass as I tried to do in one game is because, as I mentioned, every 14 turns evil is taking over, so you need to turn over some of these things, and it's just a pain in the neck to have to take everything off and try to put it back on. So it's a little bit of an approximation, but I think you get the point here. So I've got these 3 areas that are 4 areas that could possibly have some sailing involved. You can also swim, by the way. And the first random thing you need to do is to place your dragon. I mentioned this dragon will travel, and he's going to start in his lair, which is right here. And you'll notice it's a little hard to see there, but every single hex has a letter value and a number value, so C4, C5, etc. To roll, if you know the tile that you're going to, in this case we know it's the dragon's tile, the way it works is you're always rolling these 2d6s. There's a white one and a red one. The white one is always going to refer to the letter of the space, so 1 or 2, A, 3 or 4, B, and 5 or 6, C, and then you're going to refer to the number. So we'll see where we get the dragon. So this we would read this as C5. So our dragon, when it is instructing us to place our dragon in a random space at the beginning, he or she is going to go right there into C5. Now, you can also have to place random throughout the map, and I mentioned that there are 3 types of tiles. There's the brown ones, which are the common areas, green or elven, and purple are the magic, and it's a similar kind of thing. So you're rolling first to determine what kind you get, and they're each numbered with a Roman numeral. So that's number 1 and number 2, number 5, etc. And that's how you get to the specifics of which tile within that. So you would be rolling now, say if I was doing random in general, a 1 and a 1, so I've got 1 refers to one of the common ones, and then the other one, it's going to be common Roman numeral 1, so that's Torwall. Then within that, I would do another roll like we do here. This corresponds to A6, so then that series of rolls would be placing whatever we were going to be needing to do on A6, which is, I guess, right here in the middle. So through that fairly easy system, you can carry that through the game to find any type of placement that you need on any type of area. At the beginning of the game, everybody is going to start in a common area, so we're simply going to roll. I'm not going to walk you through all of this, but for example, for yellow, I'm going to roll, and I rolled a 1, so yellow is going to start somewhere in this common area, number 1, and blue is going to start in common area number 4, which is here, and green is going to start in common area number 2, which is here, and last we have purple is going to start also in 1. So the next thing I'll do off camera is just figure out where within these spaces these guys start. All right, I have set them up, and I've noticed something about my setup here that I'm going to need to change, and I want to point it out on camera and do it on camera because this is part of the challenge of this game, I think, and where I just haven't really been able to figure out how to make this totally work. First of all, viewers will notice there's an additional placement here of this magic tile here that had fallen on the floor, so I discovered it and just stuck it up there. However, I'm noticing here that I mentioned when evil begins to take over, it starts with the common territories first. And to the extent that there is strategy in this game, it involves completing as many tasks as possible that involve the common territories first, because when the order of the demons taking over has to do with how many task markers are on a territory. Well, what is a task marker? This is a task marker. These are actually really most of the markers in the game. I mentioned in the unboxing video that it was a little disappointing to me that there are, in the tasks described, there are many fantastic things you're doing, like finding magical flowers and things of that nature, but there are no markers to indicate any of that. All the markers that you have, really, for the most part, are like these, and I'll show you how they work. So, for example, just to come back to this sample task card that we pulled, it's asking us to guide the young master from the Green Grove A4 elven dwelling to a random common or elven dwelling space to hear the wondrous stories of, etc. What you would do if you pulled this card, and the way that I do it is I place, for example, an A1, this is the yellow wizard here, on this card, and I need to find the beginning of the task, Green Grove A4. So Green Grove A4 is going to be up here, that little house right there. So onto that I would then place A2. And where do you need to take him? We need to take him to a random common or elven space. Well, as it turns out, and I set up this way, the next random common or elven space, I'm assuming, even though it's ambiguous that it means on a different tile, would be somewhere in here. So I would do my randomization rolls as we did before, and whatever I came up with, I would then place the next task marker, let's just say it's here. Those would be the task markers associated with task A1. And you can be having up to 4 tasks at any time, so you have all the markers here. So as the game is going along, particularly with the 4 wizards, you're going to have these task markers all over the map. When it comes time for evil to be taking over, the rules state that you are, among other things, looking to the sections that have the most task markers on them to flip first. And therefore, it is some strategy to not to have as many task markers on the common areas, which are the ones that flip first, than others. Now, why am I going to redo this map? Well, as you can see, I have these 3 common areas here, and they are all that is linking this whole section with this whole section. And if these all disappeared, I've got my boats here, but it would, it kind of breaks the game in a sense, because you could potentially be spending just so much time going back and forth that all you're doing is moving in increments and nothing really happens. This is one of the challenges with the game, is movement in particular, because you're dealing with various terrain. You have mountains here, and you have plains and forests, and there is a terrain key here. I'll just show you, since we're talking about it. So movement point costs for plains, the woods are 2, mountains 2. Nothing's really more than 2, but sailing a boat is only half. But you're rolling a simple d6 to move. And if, therefore, you are rolling a 1 or a 2, and you're here, you can see that could potentially be your whole turn. So, I don't really know how to fix this. I've thought maybe rolling a d8 for movement might help some of the issue, because one of the issues with the game is simply the game length, especially as you get toward the end of the game and a lot of these tiles are flipped and you still have to move around so slowly and collect these gems and bring them somewhere, in this case there. It can get, the end game can just really drag. So I've toyed with the idea of rolling a d8 for movement instead, keeping the same terrain effects. I don't know enough I don't have a sense enough for game design to know whether that would solve the problem. Playing co-op, they are suggesting that every time evil takes over, every 14 turns, every 2 weeks, you flip 2 tiles rather than 1. If you were playing competitively, you would flip 1. So that both speeds up the game. That does speed up the game and also makes it more difficult. I thought, well, what if you flip 3 tiles? But then you could end up, again, depending on where the tiles were, with also something unplayable. So, I leave it to people who have better imaginations about this than I do to figure out what could tighten up the game a little bit in that regard. I think possibly for this play, or the parts of the play that I show here, maybe I will roll a d8 for movement to see if that helps, but be that as it may, I am going to reconfigure this map once again, even though I've already set up the starting places to simply make it less likely that we're going to end up with a lot of dead possibility if these two things, for example, flip over and then everything's completely disconnected and we're just like hanging out in the water and spending turn after turn trying to move. So I'm going to do that and come back and take some turns.
A couple points here before we begin play. I basically tossed out anything I had been doing before that was earlier in the video in terms of actually playing the game, and decided to completely randomize the placement of these tiles. So I turned them upside down, shuffled them around, and just sort of placed them out, and this is what I got. I then did my random placement of the wizards. Sorry, it's a little hard to see the color differentiation. This is green. I haven't named them yet. I'll do that as play continues, or as play begins. Purple back here, yellow, and blue ended up here. I am going to go with the D8 for movement, and I've switched over, for those of you that know the game and know the reference to the red die, I'm going to be playing with a green die instead of red, because I think it matches more thematically in terms of the color, and also it matches my D8. So I'm going to roll the D8 for movement, as I talked about, and the 2 D6s per the rules. Setting up, each wizard comes with a sheet, and this is a copy of the original sheet. Won't go over it in too much detail, but as mentioned, as you are completing these tasks, you are gaining values of knowledge, perception, and power, and based on how many of these points you accrue, you will rise up through the ranks of the wizardry, from apprentice to scholar to sage to wizard, and only when you are at level 4 wizard can you approach one of the existing high wizards to attempt to get a gem. This is the player sheet, or the player map. I don't know why I'm having focus problems here, sorry about that. That comes with the game, and we have our task cards here. I went over those. Event cards are pulled as a result of random rolls. Ditto the wizard cards, and some of these will have the named wizards on them and indicate placement on the map, and some of them will be basically false wizards and not actually the real wizard, and then you'll have to deal with that. The calendar is here. This is basically a turn track, and so we're recording here pretty early, so sorry about the lighting. Every 14 days, as you go through the turn track, that is when potentially evil can take over. I say potentially because you can thwart evil, and if you can see here, appropriately dark, this says evil thwarted. If you are completing 10 tasks, for every 10 tasks that are completed, and as we're playing cooperatively, this would be all of us together, we can move this task complete marker to the evil thwarted spot. And I mentioned earlier that it's unfortunate that there are not counters for the many fantastic things that you encounter in the game, and what you're meant to do here on your player record sheet is to keep track of, for example, you can run into a unicorn, and you can use the unicorn for travel purposes, so there's no way to give yourself that unicorn counter, so you need to indicate that here. I have picked up other counters from random games I have to try to match and place them on the board here as needed, but I don't really have, I don't have a unicorn counter, for example. I've got a horse. but I also don't like to, I got to open up too many different games, and the potential for things getting lost is just too high. So this will be used to record as indicated, and you've got the task record here. Now I'm using, we're set up, as I said, to play. One other difference that I have done is that when the game is meant to begin per the rules, you are at level 0. You have not joined any order yet. There are 3 potential orders that you can join, and therefore you cannot be assigned any tasks because the tasks are assigned from your order. So per the rules at the beginning of the game, you are meant to be traveling around to try to come to a place where you would find a wizard, for example, in their tower, and therefore be joining an order and getting assigned your first task. In order to shave off a little bit of time in the game, I assign random tasks from the beginning, and this is definitely counter to the rules, but it works, I think, because the backstory is simply that you're not a nothing wandering around. You are a wizard. You just haven't really joined an order yet. So in progress, you are, in this case for our blue wizard, you are trying to meet a knight in a random space and escorting him to an elven dwelling to court the fair elf lady Nova. So off camera, what I did was I rolled for all of these things, and this at least gives some direction to the beginning of the game, aside from simply just trying to find the place where you will encounter the wizard, because those are known places, and again, it can impact, especially if you're playing solo, how you set up the map, etc. Now unfortunately, so here's my blue wizard here, and he the random space that he needs to get to is all the way over here in A2. It's actually in the Sacred Circle area. And the place he needs to escort the knight to is over here. So he's got some direction and a lot of ground to cover. While he's doing this, he's going to be attempting to join an order to meet a wizard. This can happen through a random event pull. It can also happen at the Sacred Circle if he's already there. Unfortunately, as I said, there is a lot of luck in this game and randomness. It's showing up here because our green wizard, the task that he drew initially is to deliver a message from Lord Tolkien of the Hillshire C6 Common Town to Lord Sarek of the Crescent Ridge Common Town. So what will he get for that? He will get 10 knowledge. I guess he's going to be learning something in this message. He began over here. He needs to basically go to here and then over to here. So he's got a bit of ground to travel also. And our purple wizard's task was, let's see, here we go. Receive the Jewel of Light, I'll explain the asterisk in a minute, from somebody in this elven dwelling. Wash it in the sea, at least 3 water spaces from any land, to cleanse it from all earthly impurity. Then present the jewel to Aura, the royal elf maiden, over here. And this is occurring now. Our purple wizard is beginning here. All this is going to be occurring over here. So he's going to need to travel here and somehow take a boat or go out into the sea. I don't think it would make sense for him to sail all the way around because ultimately he's got to bring it over here. So this is the task for this wizard, at least initially. And finally, the one that ended up closest to what he or she needed to do is to retrieve the elf maiden Esther from a random common or magic space, return her to any elven dwelling, and that is worth 5 knowledge and 5 power. And the way it all worked out, I did do the random roll, but I actually ended up beginning close to where I am already, and there's a random elven dwelling nearby as well. So the rolls worked out. Let me explain to you now how a demon encounter is going to work. what we've done, we're still in the first turn of the game, and we're the last player here on yellow. We rolled on our D8 a 7, so we moved into this space because our goal was getting to A2. We landed here, but in addition to the 7 that we rolled for movement, on the D6 we rolled a 3. This means on 1 to 3 that a random encounter can take place, and when you roll that, then you roll on the random encounter table, and we did that, and we got a 1. The 1 on the random encounter table is, we're at rank 1 to 3 wizard here, is Demon's Attack. So what we do is we place a demon marker on the space, and any player must dispel the demons in order to remove the marker. So this marker here, which could, if it remains, is going to be in play later on in the game to count as potential to flip tiles, is going to come into the space where we are, and we're going to have this encounter. Now, as you're getting the theme here, a lot of these things that happen in the game are a result of die rolls. So for demons here, it says when a player lands on a demon marker, or in this case there is one, having an encounter with a demon, we roll 2 dice, reading only the higher die on the table below, and that's what we're going to do right now. So we're going to take our 2 d6s, and well, we're going to get a 6. What did we get? The demons depart. Remove the demon marker from the board. The player receives a roll of 1 die in any type of points. Oh, that's actually pretty good. So what we get to do is we get to take off this demon marker, actually, that we just put there. So that's good. And we will then roll our d6. Here we got a 1, so we're going to get 1 point in any value that we choose here, and we have no values because we're just starting out. So up on yellow here, I'll just mark myself. I'll give myself 1 in knowledge. Now, remember, per the game, I am actually starting out with tasks even though I'm at level 0. So if you're following along and you understand the rules as written, you will wonder, well, why did I roll on the encounter for rank 1 to 3 when technically I'm rank 0, and that is why, because I am not playing with the actual rules for the beginning of the game, just to try to speed things up a little bit to start out with some tasks. And you can see already, now we're at the end of the first turn, but our green wizard picked up a task and has joined an order already in the first turn, was able to join the magical order of sorcerers, and so that wizard is on their way, and the rest of them are still attempting to join. That's the end of the first turn, and I'm going to come back, play through, and come back right before the fortnight ends so we can see where evil may take over. We are just about to do turn 28, and I want to show you where we are and what is going to happen as evil begins to take over. We have Eldorf the Blue has advanced to the, no, Eldorf the Blue has not advanced actually. Eldorf the Blue is still at level 1, and we can see the stats here. There is a chart for advance depending on which order you are in. The Zumzum the Green has advanced to the 2nd level based on tasks fulfilled, and we have some outstanding tasks here and outstanding tasks along the board. I'm not going to go into detail so much about what they are, but I will say that we just pulled in one. Let's see, I think it was this yellow one, right? We've got, unfortunately, our yellow wizard. This is Wirtz the Yellow. Wirtz the Yellow has not had such great luck, and indeed Wirtz the Yellow is at a 2nd level, but the 2 tasks that Wirtz has both involve, the word schlepping just keeps coming to mind, but that says more about me maybe than the game. I don't know, but maybe about the game.
Wirtz has to obtain 5 sacred bells crafted by Havor, the Elford of the Edgewood A1 Elven dwelling, and then deliver them. And then here, this is receiving 4 magic rods and delivering them or burying them in 4 random spaces. So that's a lot of moving around the board here that needs to occur. But at this point, back to what we were talking about, where evil takes over after the the passage of the basically the third fortnight, the evil is going to take over for the first time. We have an event here that was picked up by what did I call him? Vidal the Purple. And you can see it's an extended event, and it says that Melifar of Meadowform, the Seer of Common Folk, gives you the ability to foresee which territory will next fall to evil. Choose immediately the tile which will be next turned regardless of task or demon markers, but obeying the limitations of territory type. So what that meant was, when we picked it up a number of turns ago, we had to decide then which of the common territories we were going to decide would be turned over to evil. 2 are going to turn this time, and the way it would normally be calculated is to add up outstanding task markers plus any demons that are there, and the one with the highest on it, meaning the least presence of good magic, is the one that would turn, or in this case, the 2 that would turn. Now, I had at the time far fewer demons and task markers out, but I decided in any case, just because of the way the map was built, that this was going to be one of the ones that would flip. And in fact, I think it might have been anyway, because we've got a total of 2 outstanding markers and 1 demon for 3. This one certainly is going to flip. Let me see if there's anything here. There's not. So we've got 2 plus 2 is 4 here. There's 2 demons here. So actually, the one that I chose would have been the one to flip anyway. So what will happen now is that this is going to flip and this is going to flip. And the consequence of that are that the task markers associated with these tiles will be lost, and therefore the tasks will become impossible to complete. So we've got an A task for our blue wizard Eldorf, and we've got a green task for our green wizard. Those are going to become impossible to do, and actually, luckily, on here, this tile, this is the same task associated with it. So in turn, this is going to be the only one lost for our green wizard, and we'll be losing this for the blue wizard. Additionally, there's further things that happen when the tiles are flipped, which is that we need to place a random or a demon marker is going to be placed in a random space of the territory containing each wizard. So we will be doing our random roll and placing another marker there. Now, as this is on a tile that is flipping, I believe he moves to a random spot. I have to confirm that. So he will move to a random spot, and there will be a demon marker placed there, and then there will be demon markers placed here, here, and here. And so it goes. Every 2 weeks thereafter, we will be flipping 2 more tiles, continuing on with first the common, and then we move to the elven, and then finally you're left with the magic squares or the magic tiles. The dragon lair, as is already evil, does not ever flip. You do need, toward the end of the game, to really protect this sacred circle, because, as I said, if this flips, the game is automatically over, because in order to win the game and collecting those gems, you need to arrive there. So if that is gone, then in effect you have lost. So there's some strategy toward the end of the game where you will be potentially focusing on clearing this tile, this area of at least task markers, if not demons, because you don't want it to be susceptible to flip. You want the other ones to have more on there. You know, that's one of the limited strategies of the game. I mean, part of part of what I've been saying, I talked about the tile placement strategies and also the placement of the task markers when you are given a choice. You want to bear in mind if you're approaching that day 14 of whatever fortnight it is, you will be able to have a sense of which one may flip, and you want to be trying to focus on getting those tasks completed to have some matter of control over what might flip or not. So for example, had we not already determined through that event card that this would be flipping, we may have focused on clearing these task markers if indeed for some reason we didn't want this one to flip or we were concerned about that one flipping. That is some strategy that's available to you in terms of fulfilling the tasks and the order of that. Also, obviously, saving this sacred circle and Hamdrill's cottage here, because she is a bestower of gifts. She can summon wizards, especially toward the end of the game when you need some, if you don't have your wizards out. And we didn't see this in the video, but wizards will appear on the map due to some random events and things, but if they're not all out and you need to get some gems from them, you're going to need Hamdrill's help. So you want to save her area as much as possible also. Overall, the strategy in the game is limited, and you know, the length of the game is very long, as I've said, and I tried to speed it up by using the D8. That helped to some extent. You get spells as you ascend in the order of your wizard, which will grant you more speed. That can help a little bit, but some of it is mitigated by just what types of tasks you are drawing and, you know, where they may be located vis-a-vis where you are. And also you can get hit through an event, for example, just knocked into a random spot. And that happened to me a bunch of times. You may get knocked back into the dragon's lair. It can become frustrating, frankly, sometimes because you just don't have control, obviously, over that. So it is a game of luck in that regard. I think the reason ultimately why it felt like it was dragging too much to me, and why ultimately I can't even make myself continue through it to show you the very end game, is that it feels a little samey after a while. That you know, what you're doing with the tasks, even though they're described in very florid language and all sorts of delivering a message and rescuing somebody, I guess to some extent, the values that you're gaining maybe relate somewhat to the tasks. You know, if you're rescuing someone, I don't know, why would you gain knowledge and perception as opposed to power? It doesn't really make sense to me. Part of the other frustration is that because you're drawing random tasks, you may need a task that's going to grant you, say, more power, for example, but get tasks that grant you more knowledge. So again, you're sort of stuck there. You need to fulfill them to move around, and that is the motivating factor of the game, but it's difficult to control that. You can try to gain some more tasks, but those are limited to and can be obtained, you know, rolling on the various tables that are in the rules, and if you don't roll on getting one, you're not going to get another one. So, you know, that can be a little bit frustrating too, and the game, I think, has, excuse me, it had some really great ideas. I like the fact that it is focused on, well, I can't say it's focused on cooperation, but it is a non-combat focused game, and the quests and tasks, such as they are imaginative and creative, but do ultimately boil down to moving around the map and just sort of a race against the tiles as they are being turned over, and to some extent the luck of what tasks you're getting and how easy they are to fulfill, and then the points that you get for fulfilling them, how quickly you can ascend through the order of it. So that is that's my look at Wizards. It's a game that I think the components of it in some way have more promise than how it plays out, especially now. One of my viewers pointed out when I did the unboxing a great suggestion. These are incredibly rich material for doing some type of fantasy RPG outside of the context of this game, and that was a great suggestion, and I may well do that someday. It's not likely a game I will trade anytime soon, but it's also not likely a game I will take out again anytime soon. And indeed, I can't even muster the energy right now to finish up playing. So those are my thoughts on Wizard, and as always, I thank you for watching.